Hello there, me again. So I in the previous video we made the flap thing with one long piece, but I wanted to show you that if you haven't got a long piece, how to make it into as 3 separate pieces. So as I say, we've got one face here, one face here, and one face here. So we've got 3 individual sections. This section measures 5 inch by 6.5. This section measures 5 inch by 7, and this section measures 5 inch by 2.5. Now we're going to add a flap onto this piece and to this piece, which will stick onto the back of this piece. Okay, so the 5 inch width, which is that width there, is consistent on all 3 pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got some card here, and I'm going to trim them both down to 5 inch wide. So 5 inches there, and trim it down. So I know that that's now 5 inches wide. And I'm going to do the same with this piece. I'm going to cut this piece down and stick it over that way. 5 inches on that side. And I'm going to keep them bits for later. Right, so I've got my 2 5 inch wide pieces of card. Now I need to cut them to the correct length. So that piece lengthwise is 6.5 inches, but I'm going to add 1/2 inch onto that measurement to act as the flap to join that to that. So it wants to be 7 inches long. So 7 inches long. Can you see that? 7 inches long there. Cut. I'm going to keep that. Okay, so that's my first piece. The second piece we don't need to do anything with, but we do need a piece cutting out, and we need to cut it out 5 inch by 7 inch. 5 inch I've already cut. So I'm going to cut this one to 7 inches as well, because this one doesn't need the flap. So we're all right with that one, doesn't need a flap. The third piece is 5 inch by 2.5 inch, but we need to add 1/2 inch onto that for the flap to join that piece to that piece. So this piece needs to measure 5 inch by 3 inch. Use that. Oh, not wide enough, look, see, I've got another bit. Yeah, that's it. So 5 inch by 3 inch. So let's do my 5 inch piece first. And then I want it 3 inches wide. So if I spin it round, and 3 inches. So I've now got 3 individual pieces. 1, 2, and 3. Move all them other bits out of the way. Now I need to score my 1/2 inch. So those 2 are the same length at the moment, but one needs to be a little bit shorter. So if I put it in lengthways, not widthways, because that's the 5 inch, that's what we need, but this one we can flip lengthways, and I'm going to score at 6.5 inches. So that gives me this 1/2 inch flap here. And I'm going to do the same with this piece. I'm going to turn it that way on, and I'm going to do it at 2.5 inches. So that gives me this flap here. So just to show you again, I've got 3 individual pieces. That's the middle bit. It has no score lines on it, none. This bit here on the left is the bit that will sit here at the bottom, and that has got a 1/2 inch flap score line there. So I'm just going to fold that one over, and then this little piece will sit up here, and this has also got a 1/2 inch flap on it. Now what I need to do with those flaps is I need to just taper off those corners. So if you remember when we were doing the pockets the other day, I said that if you taper off those corners, it means that when you join the two pieces together, it gives a neater finish at the point where the two pieces of card will meet. Right, so that's the 3 pieces again. So the middle one, no flaps on. So this one with the flap is going to be joined on at the bottom down here. So I'm just going to put some glue on, because what we're going to do is we're going to put these flaps on the back of that middle bit. So I'm now going to sit this middle bit on top of the flap there. So that what will happen is that will now be able to flip up and the flat bit is on the back, so it's not going to be a problem. Okay, so I'm just going to pull that down. This little bit is going to sit and be attached to, again, this middle section, but I'm going to put this flap underneath the back. Okay, so I'm just going to put some glue on there, on that flat bit. And that is going to sit on top of there, so the flap is now at the back. So that now gives you one long continuous piece, and the flaps that have joined that and that to this are on the back, because we're sticking this back piece to the page. Now one of the things I will say is when you do this, if you decide to attach this around 3 sides so that you've formed a pocket at the top when you come to attach it to your page, this has formed a little ridge where we've got this flap. And again, this is why I like, my micropaw's picked up all these bits. This is why I like my micropaw again, because I'm going to put a little thin strip, go find the end, of micropaw over the ridge of that card. Because it's paper and because it's thin, it now means that if I slide something over there, it's not got anything to catch on. Whereas it could, of course, on the ridge of the card there. So it just evens out that little step that the card creates from that piece to that piece. Alright, so it just gets rid of that little step. By the same token, I can do that to this piece up here too. So it just eliminates that step that the card has made. You don't have to do that. That's just an extra little bit that I like to do. So now we have got our folded Ujimabib flip what's-it bobs doodly what's-its thingy jigs, whatever you want to call it, little flip up flip down. The next thing I would do then is to attach the closure, the ribbon closure. And so I'm going to use my oatmeal seam binding. You can use ribbon if you want. And I'm going to attach it to the back side. And I want to attach it at the centre at the top. And I'm going to do that by placing a globule of glue on there. And I'm just going to plonk it on. Now I haven't cut it at the moment, I'm just plonking the end on there. And again, I'm going to use my micropaw and give it a double whammy adhesion with the glue and the micropore. So I'm just going to cut a strip of micropore and stick that over the top. So now it's really held in place. Okay, turn it over to the front. Now I know that my seam binding needs to cover this front flat bit, alright, but it's got to make a bow here in this area. So I'm going to cut it so that there's plenty of length for me to be able to make a bow closure. And I'd rather cut it too long so then I can trim it. If I cut it too short, I can't add, but I can trim this down if it's too long. Now I also need the ribbon coming from this end up over the top as well. So I'm going to turn it to the back again, and I'm going to add a piece of seam binding at this end. So again, I'm going to go to the centre. I'm going to put a globule of glue. I'm going to attach that seam binding to the glue, and to help the seam binding to stay in place, I am going to use a strip of micropore. So it's got the tape on top. So you could use washi tape, but as I say, I just find the micropore better. And I'm going to turn it to the front again. Now I want my bow to be in this area where this flap is. So I know that the seam binding has got to cover this section, this section here to get up to this point here. So I definitely need it that long, and then I need the extra to be able to make the bow. So I'm just going to cut it off about here. So once again, I can always trim off the excess. I'm just going to test that out to see if it works. Okay, now I can see, look, I've got way too much seam binding there, but I can trim that down afterwards, and I will do that once all these areas have been decorated and I've got my little notepad in there, because that will take up a little bit of extra depth here between the back and the front, which means that I might need a slightly longer piece of ribbon. And if I've already trimmed it and I've trimmed it too short, I've had it again. So I might as well just leave it, wait until it's all in place, tie it up, and then trim it down. Right, that's that bit done. Now on this inside piece here, this middle piece, we talked about matting each of the pieces. So the surface area of that middle piece is 5 inch by 7 inch, but I'm going to cut a mat to fit on it that is 4.5 inch by 6.5 inch. So I'm going to cut it smaller so that it leaves a border of this card showing on either side of the pattern. Now for the digital kit that I've used, the Calico Collage Garden Fresh kit, I'm going to use that piece as the bit that goes on the back. So as you can see, I've already cut this down to size so that I've got a border here, here, here and here. Right. Now I'm not going to glue this in place just yet because I want to show you something. With your leftover strips and bits, you can make a bar that goes across there. So then when you attach your booklet, it sits on the bar and it stops it from sliding down. The other thing that you need to add is, once you've matted this piece, is you need to add a pocket on the bottom here. We talked about pockets the other day, just having them flat, or having them with the folded back so that they're slightly raised so that you can get more in. One of the things about adding a pocket here is that eventually when you lift that up, it's going to fall upside down, and so whatever is in the pocket will fall out. So you want a deep enough pocket and a flat pocket so that it's holding whatever is in it really close to the back side of this. So that, whilst it makes a nice pocket, might not be quite deep enough. So you need to cut a piece that is probably about to the halfway point of here to make sure that it's deep enough to hold in whatever is going to go in. So you would mat that, then you would cut your pocket to whatever size you wanted, and I'm going to use this as the demo bit just to show you. You would then attach that around 3 sides so that it's flat against this surface, but it needs to be deeper than this piece that I've got here. So then whenever you put in, it will still maybe fall out, but it is less likely to because it's a flat pocket. But we're going to now trim the bar for across here, and I only want it to be about 1 inch wide. Paper trimmer, where have you gone? There we go. So I'm just going to do 1 inch wide strip. I'm not gluing this in place because, as I say, I want to show you something. On my original one, let's get it to show you. I added my strip here. Now, as you can see, I've put 2 little brads, well, medium-sized brads, on the ends of the strips here. All right, and I'm going to do the same again on this piece. Just get I want them. No. I want them. Yes. Now there are 2 ways to attach these. So a brad comes with a prong. Once you insert it in, you then open up the prongs and it holds it in place. If you don't want to use the prongs, then you can just cut it off here and then put some glossy accents glue on the head of what would be the brad. So you put the glue in there and then just stick it on top. Now if I attach this to this with the brad, so I would poke a hole, poke it through, and then the arms, the prongs, would open up on the back side of this. The problem with that is that these prongs will then start to protrude through the page of the signature, and we don't want that to happen because we don't want it to tear the paper. I could attach this bar to this paper, and then the prongs would be on the back of here, so then it's protected. All right, my bar, I want it to be the same size as this width of paper and not the same size as this background piece. So I'm just going to trim it down to size. That's about right. And I want it to sit quite high up so that when I put my pad in, the fold of the pad will sit against this top edge. Sorry, I'm creating shadows today. The light's not brilliant. So that the top edge of the fold of the papers for the notepad will flush up against this top edge of the bar. If I have the bar down here, then it's not going to sit against the top edge and they'll just slide out. So I want this quite high up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the edge here and here so that I can position that at the top up there. And then I'm going to sit it on top of my bit of foam and get my pokey tool. And again, you can measure if you want. I'm just going to do it by eye. We want it halfway down and a little way in to allow for the head of the brad, so that the head doesn't extend over the edge of the paper. And then I'm going to poke those through. And I'm going to poke that through there. Go on. There's always one in there that's awkward. There we go. Alright. And if I turn it to the back, if I open this up, can you see my prongs are too long and it extends beyond the paper? I could turn them and then they're not so much of a pain in the bum. Now there's no reason why I can't cut these down, so that if I opened it up I could actually cut those down. A, you want to use your really old scissors, and B, you need to be really careful when you cut it, because when you cut it those metal pieces will ping, and the last thing you want is it pinging that way up towards your face and getting in your eye. The other thing you need to do is use this bottom end of your blade rather than the tip, because then you've got slightly better control, and then you could trim those down. What it will do though is it will make a rough edge where you've cut it, and so what I like to do, both if I cut it and if I don't cut it, is I get my trusty tape and I place the tape over the top, and so that now protects my fingers from catching on the metal. But it also means as well that when I come to attach my page, instead of trying to attach metal to paper, because the micropore's there, I'm going to be putting glue on the micropore and not on the metal. So let's clear my decks a bit so you can see. So then this will then attach up here, and that now forms a comfortable bar. Do it that way, a comfortable bar for my paper pad to stick over. So then when I close it up, I can then do that up. Now when it comes to attaching it to the page, which we're not doing just yet, don't forget, you can place glue around 1, 2, 3 sides to make a top loading pocket, or 1, 2, 3 sides to make a side loading pocket behind it, and then you've got a secret little hiding place as well. Right, I'm in desperate need of a cup of tea, as I always am, so have fun and I'll see you later. I'll leave that there for you to pause and make a note of. See you tomorrow. Bye.